All right, any questions?
Question time?
Yes.
Please stand.
You know I like to yell, but I'll use the microphone. First, I will acknowledge the department's openness to industry feedback. It's clear that a number of BidX questions have been asked, and the responses have been incorporated into special provision changes and addenda, and so much appreciated. In the spirit, though, of maintaining maximum flexibility, there are a couple trouble areas or issues that might prevent some solutions we'd like to talk through today. And I'll start probably with the easy ones. Topic that initially came up in this process, I think has been answered, but worth reiterating. Is the department providing interest rate protection from bid day to financial close?
Thanks for laughing. The answer that we've given so far is no, we don't intend to change that. We understand the issues that it causes for the industry, and the answer at this time is no. But we're open, as we said, to discussions about possible solutions. Just to say, oh yeah, we'll go ahead and do that, whatever you want. It's not going to happen, but we haven't heard a possible solution yet. We've just heard, please don't do this. So,
well,
you got a solution? Let me know what the solution is.
Sure, but we're not going to do that in front of everybody else.
Oh, no, wait, right now.
We are still competitive. Well, having said that, I think the general response has been industry smart enough. We can figure out market solutions that may or may not be viable. In order to make those most viable, though, let's start with some easy, just technical timing questions. If there is open market products that we can use for interest rate protection, they are expensive. We need to know from the date of bid submission to the date of apparent low bidder notification. I understand there's going to be a gap there to determine there's no imbalance of bids, et cetera, and then obviously review of financial submission. The longer period of time between bid submission and notification of apparent low bidder, the more exposed bidders are, particularly if bidders go for a market solution and then are not notified as the apparent low bidder. Are you following where my concern is? So the basic question that was asked on BidX, and it was answered that it's a moot point because financial submission will come at the same time as bid submission. That's not really getting to the point. The point is, if we're going to get a market solution for interest rate protection, there's a large expense that needs to be outlaid by the contractor. It's very difficult to take the risk of spending that money until contractor knows they are the apparent low bidder. And between bid submission and that period, there's exposure to interest rate risk, right? So the question is, how long a period of time will it be from bid submission to apparent low bidder notification?
Maybe I could ask a clarification. Chris, are you saying that a bidder who wanted to use a product, a hedge type product, wouldn't do that until they knew they were apparent low?
Correct.
So you're submitting that contractor would submit their contract price. They don't know if they won the job, but and they understand there's this risk, because that risk goes until March 31, 2020, or until there's financial close. So you're saying that the sooner we know whether we're selected or not, that's when we'll spend the money to buy that hedge to take us to the March 31, 2020 date.
But we don't want to buy the hedge until we know we're going to get the job, right?
Well, I think the goal of the department is to announce, and I'll let Jim not speak to this because it's your process, but we're not going to, I remember I said the SWAT team's coming in on December 13 to start looking through that financial submission. I don't see it taking when I'm talking a little bit for him too, but I don't see it taking more than 3 or 4 days because we're only looking at one at that point. And I would think, and then you've got your process, right, to go through on DBE plan and the balancing, et cetera. So I could see, if you're asking the department to commit to a 10-day period to announce apparent low, is that what your question is?
Well, I guess I'd ask the department to commit to a 3-day period if we're looking for commitments.
He's asking about apparent.
Yeah, maybe let's get a little clarification.
Yeah, maybe this is a syntax question too. I'm saying apparent low bidder as defined as the department has notified, this is not notice to proceed, but notified bidder, your financial submission has been accepted or is feasible.
Okay,
Now let's start marching.
Let's go through the process here just a little bit so that we're all on the same page. When we get the bids, we'll open the bids. All right, somebody will have the lowest bid. I mean, that would be an apparent low. But that's to us, because then we have several steps we go through to validate that it's actually a good bid. Because we may look at some stuff and say that, we can't even accept that bid. We generally do that in one day. And we do it in one day when everything falls into place. If I tell you today that it will take one day, this will be the time that things do not fall into place. And it will take 3 days to get to the apparent low. Once we determine that apparent low, then we turn loose these guys and we say, go look at that financial stuff. We got to get it released to us because we only want the one. We'll get through that information and then we'll declare the lowest responsible bidder if that financial information passes muster.
Okay, so that's where the syntax problem was. The lowest responsible bidder notification. What is the time?
So you want to know from the bid opening to the time that we would declare the lowest responsible bidder.
Right. Yes.
It depends.
That's a problem.
Yeah, I understand. But it depends mostly on the contractor, not on us. It depends if there's an issue with the financial documents and we need to ask for clarification. It depends on whether there's an issue in that 1 to 3 day period up front. And we can give you a range. Barney indicated maybe 10 days. My indication was closer to 3 weeks to get to lowest responsible bidder, but that was allowing a little bit more time for the financial experts to take a look at financial submission. I don't have a lot of experience with that, so I'm not sure exactly how long it is. That's why we haven't been able to give a specific time frame, and we will not be able to give a specific time frame. There are just too many moving parts associated with that. And to make a commitment in some type of contractual document that said, hey, we will have this done by such and such a date, I don't think we can do that.
Well, today might not be the day, but I urge you to revisit that because the implications are a 7-digit variety there, which is significant. Yeah.
But we're going to be under contract for 30 days. So you're talking 20 days. You're hanging out there with a price.
Well, you're talking 30 days, really. I mean, you have
for bid submission.
You have to estimate your price of your hedge, and that could change fairly dramatically in a 30-day period, right?
Yes, but how, I think how you solve that problem is up to you. Maybe there's some people who say, oh, this interest rate hedge thing, it's kind of cool, but you know what? I'm willing to put a little contingency in there and, take rates could go down. Rates could go down. See, this is the thing that always gets me with people in the time. It's, a year from now, rates could be lower. 2 weeks from now, rates could be lower. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but there's a cost to the hedge, and that time is built into the cost of the hedge. And the question then is, when do you buy it, and how long do you have to hold it out for? You're going to have to hold it out till March 31, 2020. That we know. Because you might get to close sooner, you might not. But your question, Chris, is when do I buy it?
Correct.
If I'm not going to get selected.
Right. So I think we beat that one up, but hopefully you get the point there why 3 weeks is an issue. And you're right, rates may go down, but under this system, you ain't going to get the benefit of that. You're going to be paying the upside, though. So I hope that's well acknowledged. Moving on, timeline-wise then, on the appreciate going from 60 days to 30 days for bid opening period, I think that's an understandable risk for the low bidder. For the second place bidder, though, now we have the same situation, right? The second place bidder has uncovered 30 days of interest rate exposure, right? Okay. I don't know what the question is other than I would again urge you to at least revisit the interest rate protection for the second place bidder. That's a harder place to be in if you're in that position.
Chris,
Okay.
so I think the issue is if you have every bidder that's going to bid on the project hedge interest rate risk up front, let's just say they do, then only one bidder is going to move forward with the project, and the other 5 bidders, for example, will have hedge breakage costs that they have to pay for. Yeah, and there's an unknown way that you can't quantify what that risk is. The markets could move and it could be against you huge.
Right, point being, if you have some contingency built in for that interest rate risk and you're the low bidder and you're awarded the job, you recover it, right? Because you get the contract, you build in the contingency, maybe. But if you're the second place bidder and you don't get the job, you put yourself in a position where you have no interest rate protection because you aren't going to buy a hedge until if you don't think you're going to get the job as your second place bidder. And all of a sudden, either you don't get the job, but fine, I guess no problem, but you do get the job and you didn't buy any hedge. Because why would you buy a hedge if you're the second place bidder? Why would you go out of pocket, again, a 7-digit figure under that kind of position? So the point is, I think we can understand the 30-day period for low bidder. We would request the department consider interest rate protection for second place bidder or third bidder, whatever the situation is. That makes sense. Talk about it. Those are other things. The other thing, and maybe Tom, if you could talk to this a little more clearly, but in the flexibility structure, and I know you were fairly adamant on your point about payment of cost overruns, change orders, and quantity overruns, but we want to talk through that a little bit because whether it's a bank loan structure, bond structure, whatever your deal is, essentially it's going to be a committed fixed amount on bid day. In the case of change orders or quantity overruns, day one there is not funding for that. And resolving for it in the model is extraordinarily complex. It's not that simple at all. There's no good, clean answer to that. The only clean answer is the department's willingness to pay cash above and beyond the $7.5 million max quarterly for change orders or for quantity overruns, which would probably occur near the end of the job. I don't know if we want to add any color to that.
So I think what the department is currently doing, right, is you're not having a DCPCB issue for those amounts. You're simply saying we have a right to pay cash, but we may pay those amounts over time to the contractor through a separate agreement of some form, right? So that means that the contractor then has some retention risk, and its cost of capital very well could be higher than that 3% interest rate. So it would be great if the department would, commit now or in an addendum to just pay cash for the cost overruns.
Well, I think we need to parse out a couple of things. And one is, parse this out a little bit, and that is, as Chris just indicated, the overruns, you won't know they're overruns, for the most part, until you get towards the end of the job. You're going to overrun concrete pavement on this job. The overrun of the contract quantity is going to occur, one of the last things that happens on a job. And so that's a different issue than things like change orders where we're coming in and we're saying, hey, we're going to pave a whole nother road. We know that's not covered. And that's what we're saying, there's opportunities to if the department has the cash, pay it in cash. If the department doesn't have the cash, we need the opportunity to be able to say, we need to extend payment for this over time. Now, I understand there's some challenges associated with that. That doesn't alleviate the fact that we have $7.5 million a quarter. And we've established that number based on this is the maximum number that we can have to minimize the time period to pay this project back. And there's not a lot of extra cash hanging around, especially this year. And so I think that it's important to understand that, there's some things that are going to come right at the end, and we'll know that. But we won't, you're going to have some things that underrun, some things that overrun, and you may know some things earlier than others, but for the most part, these are end of the job things. The big things that we're going to see, and hopefully not a lot of them, would be any plan revisions that come where we say, hey, something needs to change, and we know that the overall extent of this, if it adds to the contract, that's not something that was initially figured in there. The biggest challenge, not the biggest, but the challenge that we were really trying to face is in change orders, there's an opportunity to negotiate. how that occurs. The biggest challenge that we had was in force account, the specifications spell out a very detailed methodology to determine payment for the contractor. That did not include interest and did not include any type of extension payment or anything like that. So really the thing that started this conversation was the ability to add back an interest payment to pay the contractor for those things associated with force account. And so that's where we started with this, at least.
So would the payments owed to the contractor be viewed as debt under state law, and is that permissible?
No. It's no different than when the contractor earns the money during an existing project. They earn through the month, we pay through that at the end of that month, and with this, we've set up a payment system where the contractor can be made whole, at least, from either the $7.5 million cash and the DCPC payments and the contractor out, and then we pay over time to do that. I guess I'm not a constitutional expert, but my understanding is the answer to that question is no.
So, Jim,
Well,
basically,
I think the genesis of that, the follow-up question is, unlike the DCPC structure, which are non-interest-bearing receivables, right, not debt, we have a defined 3% interest rate. Are we sure that's not debt? I don't answer that today. I'm leaving that as something to think about after the fact. And we also never like to bring a problem without a solution. And like I said, I still think there's a solution to this, which is cash. I don't know. Maybe you want to change your max payment curve to $7.4 million a quarter and give yourself some reserve for cash in these scenarios. It would solve a lot of problems. Maybe you're kind of bringing up a new topic, and this might be a later conversation, but maybe this would require a change in the extra work special provisions. If cost of financing is a recoverable cost and we can baseline that and be clear about it, maybe that solves the problem. But from our perspective, the 3% simple interest, and the market obviously doesn't work with simple interest, is not really a workable solution.
Too high?
Jim, we can't have arguments about cost of this work. This is expensive. You know that.
Jim, I was viewing this as supplemental additional certificates that would, be slotted later beyond the original scope of the project if there's such an overrun. And so the notion is, whether it's 3% or something else, is as a concept, is that a workable thing to have supplemental certificates slotted, similar but maybe not the exact same terms as the DCPC's envisioned for the base scope of the project?
It really doesn't work because banks are committing upfront to a set par amount, and you're issuing bonds, tax exempt bonds to a conduit issuer.
Right.
We're locking in the principal amount of the base curve, not extra work.
That's right.
So I think the way that the addendum is currently written is you're not intending to actually deliver a DCPC for extra work. It's simply some other agreement. There was, I think, 2 or 3 options cash or 2 or 3 options plus that 3% rate. So that's why we're really focused on the cash part, because that makes the most sense. And perhaps, Chris, I think your idea of lowering the amount of annual funding, to build in a little bit of cushion would be really helpful.
Cushion for the department.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not ours.
Yeah.
But
And then the other question I have is on underruns of quantities, right? So let's just say in an off case, the job is finished and there's an underrun of work, which means that a lender may have committed to a financing cost that is now not fully utilized. There will potentially be breakage costs on a portion of that lending commitment that would need to be terminated. So we would ask that the department in a new addendum clarify that breakage can be paid for underruns of quantities as well.
I mean, that's a cost of a tax-exempt financing solution, but not other financing solutions.
It's not a cost of TIFIA, but it would be a cost of a bank loan and/or bonds. The other thing that I wanted to ask, Barney, you mentioned a few minutes ago during your first comments that the financing cost was a bid item. So just to clarify, are you saying now that the financing cost is a separate line item under the contract, or is the financing cost spread pro rata through each of the 1,000+ line items?
We'll take that under consideration.
Okay.
I mean, If you're borrowing the financing costs, then they're gonna get paid over time, right? But what we wanted to do is provide a way for you to go to your lender and borrow that money to pay.
Right.
And it doesn't work right now because there's no stuff that you're doing. And these are soft financing costs. So I guess the thinking is, you can submit a request, we can issue a DCPC for that, or it's up to the 7.5. You know, how you fit it into the solution is up to
Right.
you. I think we're gonna be open to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I really I appreciate your willingness to work with each of the contractor, the winning bidder here, to make sure that the financing works. So is there an avenue currently now for our team to submit a direct agreement for the consideration of the department?
I think the department is open to, you know, you can submit whatever information you want. You're certainly going to need to submit the information, I would think, as part of your financial package.
Okay.
However, as with any other question or submission, the department is under no obligation to respond to that. But if you wanted to kind of tease us and give us an idea of what you're thinking and, you know, set yourselves up because you're going to win the job and you want to be ready right away to get to the lenders and get the department lined up, that's certainly up to you. Whether we respond to that kind of thing or not, that may not happen until you're the lowest responsible.
Okay. In addition, very helpful in the financing specs that you guys are willing to, you know, make any accommodation necessary to work with rating agencies, which that process has started. And you do require 2, you know, ratings for the TIFIA loan, for example. So if we have questions, or the rating agencies that we're working with have questions, can we direct them to a certain person at the department to potentially get some feedback with respect to appropriation risk, things like that?
The one thing we don't want is for the rating agencies to make direct calls.
Okay.
And I've had those in procurements, and those are very uncomfortable, I think, with the department and for the integrity of the procurement process. As Jim has mentioned, we have this bid submission questions process. If one of those questions happen to be originated from the rating agencies coming in under you as a bidder, that would be fine.
Okay. Will the state agree to?
Hold on a second.
Go ahead.
One thing to remember is anything you submit right now is not confidential.
Understand.
Okay, so, you know, if there's something that you want to present to us that you would prefer not, then it's probably best to hold it until we have a contractual relationship.
Great. The other question I have is, the department is obviously they're the beneficiary of the funding, and they're basically the obligor through the DCPCs for any type of funding agreement that is put into place. So depending on whether a bank solution is utilized or public market bonds are utilized, banks and or the public market may need some ongoing disclosure with respect to the financial quality of the state, especially if it's a public deal under 15C212. So will the state agree to provide that type of financing information in its annual report? You know, I think what the state's annual report currently says, or maybe that of the department, it currently says it has X hundreds of $millions of construction contracts that it's let, but it doesn't really give a breakdown of those contracts and the payments due in any 1 year. So are you willing to work with the winning bidder to, you know, facilitate the ongoing disclosure that would be needed for either bank or public market bonds?
The department would be willing to work with the bidder in order or their underwriter to comply with SEC regulations. In addition, if a bank solution is chosen and there's ongoing submission of information requested by the bank, the department will consider that as well. One thing the department will not do is come up with some whole new way of presenting its financial picture.
Yeah.
We have a controller, we have a way of doing that. We respond to the legislature in terms of and through the budget and appropriation process. We've also submitted information to TIFIA. So I think what we want to do is come up with 4 corners of exactly what that financial and operating data would look like. In other contexts, for example, availability payment contracts, where again it's the off-taker of the public agency that is really the obligor, but an obligated party under 15C212, for example, the TABS deal. We've come up with solutions that get, because they're not our bonds, it's not our debt, but we understand we're obligated to make payments.
Right.
So the answer is yes, but again, something like that would be very closely reviewed and negotiated to not require extraordinary measures to be taken by the department and its controller office.
Do you believe that your MAC clause and the financing provisions right now cover the conditions for funding of a traditional, public bond issue, all the termination events in a bond purchase agreement, like such as a change of legislation, change in law, rating downgrade of the department, various things that either banks or public market bondholders would have with respect to a termination or a suspension event?
I think what you're asking is are there outs for the contractor's obligation to achieve financial close
Correct.
that allows the contractor to get its financial close security back due to events that are identified in a lender commitment?
Correct.
Here we go. I don't know what that looks like. I've seen bond purchase agreements that have various outs that are out of the control of both parties, frankly.
Right.
But maybe if the department wanted to be harsh about it, we'll go figure out another way to do the deal. But I know, you came in with that way, that's what your price is based on, and then, everything goes to heck in the bond market and you can't get closed. I think the better solution is for the parties to try to negotiate some kind of extension.
True.
As opposed to pulling on a letter of credit because, all heck breaks loose in some part of the world and you can't get closed. I think the department would be willing to look at that. I can't tell you that you come up with a commitment and Barney, that's the way it's got to be, that's the way it's going to be. There may have to be some review of other examples of that kind of thing.
Sure.
And, because otherwise you're basically tying the department to one way of doing it, and I mean, it's unreasonable to expect us to say, yeah, that's the way, whatever you come up with, if my next child is not a son, then we get our financial close security back, right? I mean, there's got to be limits to those kinds of outs, or else you don't have the proper alignment of risk, which is, this is basically your obligation against the close.
Yeah, that's clearly a follow-up BidX question that would have been a new issue raised here, and we'll do so with suggested language, but you're getting it. I mean, I'll sleep easier tonight. There is a question on force majeure events in those circumstances. I think you got it.
The answer is the department will consider it. That's going to be the answer.
That's a not-minded answer today, though.
What he's telling you is that's the answer you're going to get on BidX, probably.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay.
If you asked that question and you guys answered that, we'll be able to submit for payment for all these fees, which will be substantial through mobilization. But the second part of that question, we asked that mobilization increase from 10 to 15%. Will that be answered in the addendum? Or is that a moot point?
I like the answer of moot, really.
Well,
I don't know why, but it just seems like, honestly, I hadn't seen that part. We actually took, when we had the answer to the mobilization question, we took out the cap of 50% and just said it's eligible for payment under mobilization. I'll look at it again. I didn't think that conflict was there. We were specifically trying to avoid it so that there wasn't a delay in paying the rest of mobilization. But I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, to be clear, we're asking to increase that way. We're typically limited the group totals to 10% of the group total. We're asking to increase that to 15% of the group total to be able to offset the fees.
Okay.
We'll resubmit it as a question.
Yeah, I have to reread the specification again. I know that we have when a certain amount of work is done, 5% is done, you get 50%. When 10% is done, you get 100%. I don't remember the 10% cap.
We'll send it in.
Okay, thank you.
You hit on it briefly, but I just want see what you guys are thinking on for submitting this proposal. You mentioned that it may just be a envelope that we bring down and submit it, and it may be online. Just on that, I think it talks about having to submit your model.
Mhm.
So that would be then in an Excel version. So
Yep.
if we did that,
Memory stick?
memory sticks, what you're thinking? Okay.
Yeah, if it comes down to, a hard transfer, it's not gonna be paper. We really prefer you don't have paper. It's just, a memory stick is gonna be the best way to do it.
Got it.
But like I said, we're still working through, we think we have a more elegant solution than bringing a memory stick in. Yeah.
Then I think you mentioned addendums in the work. We should see it. Well, that'll be a large addendum this week.
Yes.
Okay. And then the last question I had was, there's a question out there on the crushed rock for base course, which that 187,000 tons, significant quantity. Will that be in the addendum with a spec for that material, or that question has not been answered
Yeah, I
yet?
can't answer that question for you. I don't know.
Just so you know, that question is getting significant and time frame and all that, and for people, it's a significant
Do you know what
quantity.
question it was?
It's one of the earlier questions.
One of the earlier questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's not answered yet.
Okay.
But with that 187,000 tons, that's at the bottom of the fills. It's one of the first things
Sure.
the material suppliers are asking for, that special provision.
Okay. Thank you.
That's all, thanks.
Anybody else? Oh,
Forgive me, switching gears real quick to the BNSF bridge. The far right track, if you're looking at the plans, says future BNSF track. When can we plan for planning shoring and stuff for that track to be in?
For the future proposed track, it may never be put in. We just need a design for it. Is that what you're asking?
So it's shown in the plans. Do we plan our bids as if that track is there?
Correct.
Okay.
So that means it's kind of the difference between us having to shore that pier or not. So if the track is not going to be there, it'll save the department money. We won't have to put in sheeting. If that track is going to be there, we probably have to put in sheeting to protect the excavation. So if you're pretty sure it's not going to be there, it might be good to.
The bridge has been designed such that the railroad can put a future track in there, and so you construct the bridge accordingly as that the future track will be there at some time.
We based the span length to accommodate the track. The track's not going to be there
During construction.
I don't think you got.
Yeah. Let me ask the question again. Yeah. I don't think he answered his question.
The bridge or myself.
Let me ask you.
Future, I apologize.
all right.
I think what he's asking is that in the near future, will that be here? Because, the way that the railroad excavation designs are with zones and so forth, obviously if it's a single track there, that there will, with that space where the future track is, the piers behind that, because you've designed for that, then if we're pretty sure that that track is not going to be added on within the next 4 years. We don't have to provide for sheeting because it will be out of that zone, because it's that far away from a working track. But you don't have any, so the point is, do you have any feel for when the railroad might put a track in there, or that's?
Yeah, I can't.
Nobody's got any feel with the railroad, I understand that.
When we're done.
Not within the next 4 years?
I mean,
They can put it in next year.
probability-wise, no, there probably will not be a track.
The
there
last
for 4
time
years.
we dealt with the railroad for addition, by the time we got notification until they start construction, it was damn near 4 years. I can tell you that. Please do not plan on a track being there. And if we do, you come talk to us and we'll talk that a change order.
Good solution.
even work for you.
Well, we don't know how to pay for it.
Yeah, we'll have to work out something besides money. What? Okay. Yes.
So I've got several questions regarding the earthwork. One, there's several areas of over-exit topsoil that is tabbed out on some of the G sheets and the, I believe, D sheets. So if we are directed to over-exit more than what's called out in those tabs, is that going to get compensated for?
Go ahead, ask the question again, please.
Yeah, so there's a bid item for, well, actually, it's not a bid item, it's subsidiary to the salvaging and respreading topsoil. There's 173,000 some odd yards of over-X called out, that's subsidiary to that bid item. If we're directed to over-X more than the 173,000 yards, because there's more topsoil than anticipated, is that going to be compensated above and beyond, our
In your question, you say that the over-X is subsidiary to the placement of topsoil. So you're saying that you're being ordered to excavate more but not place it as topsoil?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
From the conference.
Take your time.
Yeah, submitted bid edits. We're going to take some time to discuss it.
Okay. Question number 2. This is more of just a query here on removal of unsuitably wet soil. There are 2 alignments that are tabbed out as excavation available, which is N2 east and N2 westbound. There's 42,659 and 1,100 cubic yards. That's quantified as excavation available, but all the other unsuitably wet soil tabs were not quantified as excavation available. Curious to why those 2 alignments are on there.
I'd say submit that as a bid X and we'll look into those items on the east. Some of that material was based off of being either reworkable or drivable, and some are just has to be wasted out as I think a couple of them were lagoons that we had to get off the site completely, but if you give it specific, we'll be able to look into it closer.
Okay. Question number 3, fat clays in the upper 3 feet. I understand there's an addendum to switch it from, or will be an addendum to switch it from 5 feet to 3 feet. In the cut areas, if we run into fat clays that are in that upper 3 feet, are we required to subgrade correct that, or would that be compensated as a change order? I thought I had some easy questions.
Well, you would think so, but you've got to think through the other aspects of it besides this straight entry.
Okay, I forget what question I'm on here, but this one I think is a bigger question. The definition of NDOT's roadbed. So I've been trying to ask some of the guys that work in the area, and I've been looking at the specs. We're from Minnesota. MnDOT defines the roadbed as a 1-to-1 slope outside of the new shoulder PI, and anything outside that 1-to-1 envelope, say it's a 6-to-1 or 4-to-1 slope, can be filled with ordinary compaction, unsuitable fat clays, or excess topsoil. I can't find anything in NDOT specs that clarify what the roadbed definition is. And right now, the way I'm reading it, every embankment has to be a class 3 and meet those specs for class 3.
That's correct.
So there's going to be a lot of excess topsoil and a lot of excess fat clays.
Well, everything inside the topsoil is class 3, but then when it calls for placing topsoil on those slopes, that's placing topsoil, not class 3
Right, but that's only a 4-inch depth.
Probably about 4 6.
You said it's minimum? Yeah,
That's minimum. So what's maximum?
not 4 feet. I mean, if we told you it had to be 4 inches, then, someone's gonna be out there with a ruler measuring it, and if you got more than 4 inches, you gotta take, that's not what we do.
So
You know,
to
we're not-
clarify, the
but-
entire width of the roadway embankment,
It's class 3.
from outside of the toe of the slope to the outside of the toe of the slope is class 3 and has to meet the specifications for densities all the way up,
Correct.
Next question, final question. The topsoil, is that included in the embankment quantity? The 4 inches of topsoil, is that included in the embankment quantity, or is there?
Why don't you submit it? We're having a discussion about how it's paid for.
Right.
We know it's paid for as topsoil. I'm just concerned it may be paid for something else also. Good question.
Okay, I'll submit it.
Thank you.
Next.
Was that it?
That's it.
Thank you.
Next up. I lost it. What else we got?
All right, Khalil, did you have anything else you wanted to say? No, you're good? No? You don't have to shift your... Oh, do you? What?
The topsoil is not deducted from the embankment, so the finished line includes the topsoil in it. And then the payment of the topsoil is for salvaging and placing topsoil by the square yard. And so that just covers the work of the salvaging and the placing, but it doesn't cover the quantity of it. So the quantity is paid for as embankment.
The quantity is included in the 5 million yards of estate.
Yes.
Thank you.
What's that? All right, well, I think we're done. Chris, did you have anything else?
No, okay.
Okay. All right. You gentlemen have anything else you want to say? Marty? Okay. All right, well, I want to thank you for making the time to be here. I hope it was beneficial to you and we didn't avoid your questions too much. Again, questions that you have that you did not ask or that you did not get an answer to, BidX, and we will do our absolute best to get to them. We know we're running short on time, so we will try to turn them around quickly. Thank you.